Yes. Hello, my beautiful friends. What an amazing day it is. Welcome back. We have a tremendous live stream planned ahead. We love it when we get a fresh helping of criminal referrals, especially from some of the worst. Two people in this case who helped to engineer the entire impeachment hoax, number one, during the Trump administration the first time around. Now, hopefully going to be held to account. We'll take a look at what Tulsi Gabbard sent out today. A lot of reaction from her as well. She had a big interview last night that we'll unpack together, and we'll understand exactly what the nature of the criminal referral is with some excerpts from it and some further analysis on the crime itself. We also have some new news that John Brennan, another potential criminal, in my opinion, without a doubt, he, of course, has been the subject of a lot of scrutiny, and some new reporting from Reuters says he might be next with potential criminal charges coming down the line. All of that coming up, and a little bit of Caroline Leavitt, who commented on these matters yesterday. Then we'll turn our attention to some election news. We've got updates out of Fulton County and out of Georgia. The Lieutenant Governor, Burt Reynolds, was out there. Burt, I think that's his name. He was the guy who is now sending a letter over to the state election board saying, you guys need to really get on this reform because we've got the midterms coming up and we can't have repeats of our prior fraudulent and rigged elections. And new emails were released out of Arizona. And after Fulton County had their pallets full of ballots seized, we saw that there was a little bit of a panic afoot in Arizona in all of the various election agencies. Election officials sending emails back and forth to each other saying, don't worry, we are going to handle it if we get raided next. So it's going to be a beautiful stream. Thank you for joining us. My name is Robert Gouveia. This is Watching the Watchers. We're very glad you're here, and we're looking forward to getting into the business on the day. Hopefully the tubes are working and we're coming through nice and loud and clear. And I think it's connected. That's tremendous news. We always like to confirm before we start just rambling off into oblivion. But it looks like we're connected. And so now let's go ahead and get started. Criminal referrals for two impeachment fraudsters now coming from Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence. Fox News reporting on exactly what was sent over to the DOJ from the ODNI. And we've got more information from Tulsi Gabbard. She was out giving a detailed interview yesterday with News Nation. We'll see what she had to say and get some updates on John Brennan, the former CIA director, who is also intimately involved with all of the lawfare, using the intelligence agencies to try to take out the president. And he might be coming next. But the big story, of course, is from Brooke Sigmund over at Fox News saying that Tulsi now sending a criminal referral over to the DOJ for two people, the ex-inspector general, a guy called Michael Atkinson, who we talked a lot about here, and the so-called whistleblower from the CIA, a guy called Eric Ciaramella. And both of these guys were essentially working hand in hand to create a false pretext, a false premise that would enable Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi and all the people on the Intelligence Committee to start leaking to the media and presenting this claim that Trump was trying to rig the elections against Joe Biden. Okay, so while they're rigging the election, the claim was that Trump was the one who was actually rigging the election. So the criminal referrals come after the new records that we read earlier this week were revealed, showing that there was a coordinated effort to advance the 2019 impeachment. And that didn't work out so well for them. This came after the fake Russia collusion hoax that we had to spend all of those years with Robert Mueller and the special counsel. When they couldn't find any actual Russia collusion, then they had a whistleblower just come out and make up a new claim about a bad phone call. That got passed over to the inspector general who fields these whistleblower claims. And then we'll see and we'll learn exactly how they perverted the evidence in order to engineer this operation. In an exclusive, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence sent criminal referrals to the DOJ for the whistleblower whose complaint helped trigger the 2019 impeachment hoax. The ODNI, the general counsel, so the lawyer who works with Tulsi, said, I want to refer information that may constitute possible criminal activity. Not going to Pam Bondi now. This is going over to Todd Blanche, the acting AG, until we get somebody else in there, maybe Todd. In violation of federal criminal law committed by one or more former employees of the intelligence community. And Tulsi, of course, now is running one of the main ones, the ODNI. Fox News on Wednesday reviewed the referrals. More excerpts from it say, the possible criminal activity concerns the circumstances described in the following congressional briefings. We had a discussion with the Intelligence Community Inspector General and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Bang Bang Swalwell was on that committee. We also know that Pencil Neck Adam Schiff was on that committee, and so maybe they'll be the next to come down. There was also a briefing by the Intelligence Community Inspector General, also another one, also in 2019. So two separate interviews with Atkinson, who was coordinating with the whistleblower Ciaramella, presented evidence to Congress, and in those presentations, according to Tulsi, committed some crimes. That's Michael Atkinson. We've talked about him a bunch lately. He's supposed to be somebody who's kind of an independent, non-biased investigator, the inspector general. And in this case, we're going to see just how badly he perverted the evidence. Now, they have in this footnote, they say he was the inspector general for the intelligence community. This was a photo of him leaving the Capitol after closed doors interviews about the whistleblower complaint that exposed a phone call that Trump had with Zelenskyy, where they were saying, hey, Zelenskyy, you have evidence, no doubt about it, that Joe Biden, who was the vice president, when he went over to Ukraine and said on camera, we've seen the clip many times, Joe Biden said, I want you to fire a prosecutor. That prosecutor was investigating Burisma. Burisma was where Hunter Biden's son, or Joe Biden's son, Hunter, was working, getting paid $83,000 a month, $1 million a year, in order to do oil and gas consulting, or in other words, to trade on the vice president's office so that Hunter could go back to daddy and then daddy could go in and fire prosecutors. He threatened to withhold $1 billion in foreign aid unless the Ukrainians got rid of this prosecutor. It's corruption through and through. So Trump's on a phone call talking about that. They said Trump's trying to rig the election. And then they preempted the entire story by creating that narrative that Trump was abusing his office against his political opponent. Meanwhile, as we're going to learn, they were the ones abusing their power. So the referrals come after Tulsi Gabbard, and we read this earlier this week, released documents in what she described was a coordinated effort by elements within the intelligence community, including Michael Atkinson, to manufacture a conspiracy. An intelligence official told Fox News Digital that the language in the referral is broad, but that it's specifically directed at Atkinson, the IG, and the whistleblower Eric Ciaramella, who reported concerns about Trump's phone call, which was the perfect phone call, by the way, over to Zelenskyy, saying the ODNI also directed Fox News to a recent post by Tulsi Gabbard that we'll look at. They also reached out to the DOJ to get information about the referral. Tulsi throws the ball. Who's going to catch it on the other side? The documents that were released earlier this week includes transcripts from Atkinson's closed-door testimony before the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. They have no intelligence, which were withheld from the Judiciary Committee during the first impeachment trial. So after they rig the evidence that they present to the Intelligence Committee, then the impeachment proceedings start. And Trump, of course, wants to know, in his defense, well, what type of exculpatory evidence do you have? Is there anything in your tranche of materials that might exonerate us in these impeachment proceedings? They bury it. They say, no, we can't give you anything. And the goal is, of course, to impeach him, win the office, seize power like they did in 2020. This was just one of many other hoaxes. Then they can come in, seize power, and then cover up the evidence of the coup. So ODNI said the documents did confirm that Atkinson failed to conduct basic due diligence, and we'll look at how he perverted the forms here in a minute, and willfully exceeded his statutory jurisdiction to mischaracterize the phone call as an urgent concern to Congress. In other words, making it into something that it isn't. And Atkinson, the inspector general, who's supposed to be above all this, during his investigation, he found that the whistleblower, Ciaramella, he did show indications of political bias. Amongst them were some of these arguments that Ciaramella was a registered Democrat. Oh, what was actually on Joe Biden's team. Oh, was actually going over to Ukraine with Joe Biden as Joe Biden was threatening Ukrainians with withholding $1 billion in order to fire the prosecutor who was investigating his son. Oh, maybe those are pretty big conflicts. And so it's like this whistleblower was actually the attacker, not the president, in favor of a rival political candidate, but still said this is urgent. And so Congress, you need to act on this. So Atkinson got a complaint, just to catch up on it, back in August 2019 from a whistleblower, Eric, who was raising concerns about a July 2019 phone call with Zelenskyy. Trump said, maybe you should look into Joe Biden and his family's actions and how they are grifting off of VP Daddy Joe. The president specifically suggested Zelenskyy look into the ventures with the Ukrainian natural gas firm called Burisma and how Joe Biden went over there and got a former Ukrainian prosecutor general called Viktor Shokin fired, threatening him. Joe Biden bragged about it. Hunter Biden was quietly under federal investigation beginning in 2018 at the time of the call, a probe prompted by suspicious foreign transactions, and the DOJ and the FBI, and all of them covered up repeatedly for Hunter Biden, warning his lawyers before they were going to execute a search warrant on a storage facility. Then Hunter's people went and emptied the storage facility. Trump's request was regarded by Democrats as a quid pro quo, but nothing that Joe Biden did was a quid pro quo. The investigation into the quid pro quo is the problem, just like it is in every other situation with these people. You are Nick Shirley, you're investigating the fraud in California. What's the biggest problem with all of that? Not the fraud, it's the investigation of the fraud. Same exact thing happening here. Democrats also said Trump was meddling in the 2020 election, so they had to go engineer a fake whistleblower complaint and then have a rigged inspector general actually meddle. Biden has acknowledged that when he was VP, he did pressure Ukraine to fire Shokin. At the time, Shokin was investigating Burisma Holdings, and Hunter had $1 million annual payday. Then the vice president threatened to withhold $1 billion of critical U.S. aid if he was not fired. We all remember the video. Joe Biden said, "You're not getting $1 billion. I looked at them and I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money." And he says, well, son of a bee. He got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time, who then didn't actually investigate Burisma or Hunter. That's the quid pro quo, not the investigation into the quid pro quo being the quid pro quo. Biden's allies maintained, no, this was a personnel disagreement. The actual prosecutor went easy on corruption as he's literally investigating corruption. Meanwhile, House Republicans back in 19 and 20 sought to refer Atkinson and the whistleblower over to the DOJ for investigation. Republicans also complained that the whistleblower, and we talked about this when we read the documents, made contact with Adam Schiff. The whistleblower went to a Democrat, Adam Schiff, and then didn't disclose that at all when he actually filed the whistleblower report. We read the form. It said, have you talked to anybody else about that? He said, no. So he lied on the form. And meanwhile, Schiff was lying to everybody about this too, going on the cables and saying, I hadn't spoken to anybody. No, all of this is a legitimate whistleblower. It's not an engineered political op. Can we see any evidence? No, it's all classified. All CIA. So the White House under Trump's first term released a declassified version of the whistleblower complaint, which revealed that the whistleblower concerns stemmed from hearsay, secondhand accounts of more than half a dozen U.S. officials. And the declassified complaint, though, stated, I was not a direct witness to anything. However, I found my colleague's secondhand, third-hand statement to be credible. And that's not exactly what a whistleblower report and complaint is supposed to entail. It's supposed to be firsthand knowledge, as we'll learn. So then, of course, we spent a lot of 2019 going through impeachment nonsense. Trump was ultimately impeached for this. This is the first impeachment, not the second impeachment after J6, was acquitted by the Senate in February 2022. The whole thing was an operation to rig the 2020 election, just one of many operations that was done and enabled for that purpose. So Tulsi came out And she had a couple of posts about this. She said, newly declassified records expose how deep state actors within the intelligence community concocted a false narrative that Congress used to usurp the will of the American people and to impeach a duly elected president in 2019. Let's not forget, in 2017, they started the Russia collusion hoax. We had Robert Mueller. They were going to come out and impeach him for that and maybe indict him for that. And that failed. So they needed a new operation. In this case, it was the whistleblower attack. Before they launched the COVID attack, then we had all of the other actual election rigging and water main breaks and all sorts of other fraud. And so the truth is now getting revealed. But here is some of the timeline saying that there was a weaponized whistleblower process. The Inspector General and his so-called investigation relied on only secondhand evidence and a self-declared Democrat whistleblower who lied about speaking with Democrats in Congress. That's Ciaramella. Then the Russiagate author, the person who tried to actually engineer the first hoax back in 2017. Trump beats the crap out of Hillary. No one has any expectation that's going to happen, catches them all by surprise. So Biden, it was VP under Obama, and Obama on his way out sat down with Comey, Brennan, Clapper, and many other people in the Oval Office and said, oh, you know what we need to do? Engineer a Russia collusion hoax. Obama had already gotten presidential daily briefings that said that Russia did not interfere in the election, or at least didn't do anything of consequence. They pulled the presidential daily brief off his desk the day before. Another day goes by. He brings them all in and he says, oh, I guess there is Russia collusion. Why don't you go recreate the 2017 ICA, the Intelligence Community Assessment? As we know, that was completely discredited because it was based on another false premise, which was the Steele dossier, which was a fake Hillary Clinton campaign propaganda piece that said Trump got urinated on by some hookers in Russia. All completely non-credible and fraudulent. And it was so bad that they couldn't even admit what it was. They had to stuff it in a classified annex and then say, oh, you can't see it. It's just all very classified. John Brennan was involved in that. Many people in the actual creation of this ICA acknowledged how problematic it was. And there's evidence that Brennan was saying, you got to be a team player. You got to get on board with this. It feels true, doesn't it? It sort of rings true, even though it wasn't. So a person who helped to write that comes back in and was a witness in this second hoax. The intelligence agencies trying to rig the elections again. And that person was also a close colleague of the former FBI agent called Peter Strzok, the guy who had those text messages with his FBI lover, Lisa Page. We will stop him. We will stop him, the FBI agents. We are the ones who are rigging the election. Now Peter Strzok is constantly on cable talking with other lunatics about how they're defenders of democracy. We have your text messages, Peter. False narrative also. Now, it turns out the Inspector General exceeded his statutory authority and ignored DOJ guidance, then submitted a faulty complaint over to Congress. Boom, they drive forward a sham impeachment proceeding. And we'll zoom in further on this from the post from Tulsi, but she was on with News Nation, and here's a little bit of what she had to say about all of this, courtesy of the ODNI.
As President of the United States.
It's a longer clip than that.
First and foremost, it is always the right time to expose the truth to the American people about the deep state tactics that have been used time and time again, fundamentally to undermine the foundational principles of our republic, and in so many cases to undermine the decisions that the American people make when they cast their votes in our elections to decide who they want to lead our country. And so the documents that we released really pointed to the fact that the 2019 impeachment occurred because there were members of the intelligence community working directly with House Democrats, specifically Adam Schiff, who's on the House Intelligence Committee at the time, concocting this narrative, weaponizing the whistleblower process, lying and abusing their power, all to create this manufactured basis that Nancy Pelosi then used to drive this impeachment against Donald Trump in 2019. I'll hit the high points on these documents. There are details and hundreds of pages of transcripts that we released in conjunction with House Intel Chairman Rick Crawford. But the bottom line is this. Number one, the whistleblower, so-called whistleblower who came forward, presented no evidence and no firsthand knowledge. This is a person who had heard about a conversation that President Trump had with Zelenskyy, then went straight to Adam Schiff on the House Intelligence Committee. And this is where they came up with this false narrative. And this so-called whistleblower then went and filed a complaint with the intelligence community Inspector General. The other witness, so-called witness to this, is somebody who also had zero firsthand knowledge and presented zero evidence, someone who was also a co-author of the 2017 Russia hoax intelligence community assessment that President Obama had ordered be created in conjunction with John Brennan and James Clapper at the time. Again, no firsthand knowledge or evidence, and someone who said that even after reading the transcript, he didn't really see the issue there until the whistleblower had explained it to him. And lastly, the Inspector General himself. And this is really such a violation of public trust and the responsibility that we expect all of our inspectors generals to have, in that he didn't conduct a full investigation. He didn't even ask to see the transcript of the phone call between President Trump and Zelenskyy. And he admitted to Congress that he did not have any evidence that he was relying on. He had made a criminal referral to the Department of Justice based on this so-called whistleblower's complaint. Department of Justice came back and said there's nothing here.
Right.
This Inspector General then went to Congress anyway and presented to them. All of this coming down to the bottom line of which this was a partisan political attempt, once again, to undermine the will of the American people who elected Donald Trump as President of the United States.
Yeah, and then after 2020, when they rigged the election in this avenue and many others, they went after the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers for seditious conspiracy. Remember that crap? This is the sedition. This is the traitorous conspiracy. It's happening from the people who are working inside the government in order to undermine the president by making up facts and then engineering the proceedings so that they go from partisan hacks like Adam Schiff over through a compromised inspector general based upon a fake whistleblower who has no evidence at all, makes its way through literal impeachment proceedings. It's insanity. And we're learning a lot more about this from this fella called Stephen McIntyre. He did some good analysis on this. He's over at Climate Audit on X. He said, back in 2019, we knew that the Inspector General Atkinson had changed the form, but we didn't know whether Ciaramella, the whistleblower, had used the new form or the old form when you're filling out the whistleblower complaint. Turns out that he had used the old form, the form which required first-hand knowledge. A copy of the Ciaramella form made public excluded the first two instruction pages in which the first-hand requirement was stated. You can't make a whistleblower complaint based on he said, she said, third-hand, second-hand knowledge. That's hearsay. Did you observe it? Yes or no? Because we're going to need you to come in and testify. Not that I heard from so-and-so and so-and-so that this happened and you play the game of telephone. While Atkinson did subsequently change the form, it was the earlier form that was submitted. He left off the two instruction pages. So Atkinson's position was that Ciaramella, the so-called whistleblower, had firsthand knowledge of some things, though. However, the things that he had firsthand knowledge of do not appear to have been especially relevant to the allegations. Atkinson, the Inspector General, cited Chuck Grassley, like the whistleblower whisperer, as authority, saying secondhand information should be allowed for whistleblower reports. But Atkinson glossed over the difference between non-urgent concerns and urgent concerns. That didn't even come up in the discussion. The requirement for first-hand knowledge was reasonable enough for an urgent concern. I saw this happen. Now this is urgent. We have to accelerate this entire process because there's going to be a stolen election or something. Now, another point that hasn't been discussed much in the Solomon articles in mid-March and April 2019, which led to these discussions, there was a discussion of Ukrainian interference back in 2016. Trump's contiguous discussion of the CrowdStrike server supports the possibility that Trump was seeking an investigation of the 2016 election interference, an entirely proper request, as opposed to an anticipatory interference in 2020. Okay, so even the phone call is more backwards looking about 16 rather than it's forward looking about Joe Biden. One of the major misunderstandings of Ukrainian interference in 2016 is that the interference, and Joe Biden was vice president at the time, was initiated by the Biden cadres, especially at the January 2016 meeting with Ukrainian prosecutors that Joe Biden was threatening. And his cadres, well, Biden was a leading candidate for the nomination. And then, of course, they subbed him out and they shoved in Hillary Clinton, probably because they knew his brain was fried. And it resulted in the Black Ledger operation that decapitated Paul Manafort as the campaign chair. The role of the Biden cadres in this interference has been clouded by incorrect pointing at Clinton. So there was obviously no way that any of the Ciaramella, Wild, or Atkinson could have reasonably been sure that the issues raised by Trump weren't related to past events. In other words, there's an alternative explanation for even the allegations that they're making here, as opposed to still distant 2020 events where Biden's nomination was far from guaranteed. Now, the issue of Ukrainian interference in the 2016 election did surface from time to time in the 2019 impeachment hearings, but it was ridiculed and shouted down by the State Department because they were too busy saying, "Ma Russia, Ma Russia." None of the Republicans or their staff appear to have been well informed enough to focus on these valid issues, which would have been an alternative explanation for Trump's phone call entirely. Had nothing to do with Joe Biden. Had to do with, well, it did have something to do with Joe Biden, but not as it relates to 2020. It has to go back to 2016. And Joe Biden, of course, was going to be the nominee in 2016, but Hillary Clinton got slotted out and slotted in for that because Joe Biden's brain is fried. So Hans Monkey, who wrote an entire book on this called Swift Boating America, and is a great book, offers the definitive account of the greatest political crime in history, which we're reading through right now, says, wow, okay, so Ciaramella did use the old form. That is the form that did not allow hearsay, but they took his hearsay and turned it into an entire impeachment operation. That means the entire impeachment was void ab initio, impossible to proceed from the very beginning because there's no evidence even facially on the form, meaning it was legally dead on arrival. The fact that Atkinson then secretly changed the form and backdated it makes it all exponentially worse. And you can see he highlights the form for us right there. Rev May 24, and it's an old form. So the form says, and they omitted the first two pages, you have to have firsthand knowledge if you're going to be a whistleblower. He didn't have firsthand knowledge, and Atkinson and the whistleblower both knew that. So they're like, oh, all right, well, how can we get around that big problem for us? And so they just shove it through, all of it based on a false premise, and it led almost to Trump's removal from office if the Senate would have convicted him. And they do this, and then they try to engineer the media, engineer the outrage, right? They go, okay, don't worry about the facts underlying the allegation. We'll just go to the media and we'll just have Jake Tapper and Rachel Maddow, and they'll just all scream and shout about this for like 4-7 months. And by the time it gets to the Senate, there will be enough public pressure that they'll vote to convict and they'll remove him from office and they'll ban him from ever running again and will win the 2020 election by default. All of that was their attempt. They failed again. And if they would have prosecuted the president in these 4 criminal cases and actually convicted him and put him in jail, then maybe they could have stole the 2024 election as well. And then Tulsi Gabbard would never be here at the ODNI, and we would never see any of this evidence of their crimes. That's their goal. So Tulsi also had the press release. She said, here's some more on this. Never before seen documents expose a coordinated effort by elements in the IC, including a former inspector general, Somebody who is not supposed to be doing this at all manufactured a conspiracy, a seditious conspiracy that was used as the basis to impeach Trump. During his preliminary investigation into Trump back in July 2019 in the phone call, Atkinson did not follow standard procedures. He relied on politicized, manufactured narratives. He only conducted interviews with 4 people. The whistleblower, so-called, the whistleblower's friend, who was the co-author of the January 2017 Russia collusion hoax ICA, all made up based on the Steele dossier, a close colleague of the disgraced former FBI agent Peter Strzok, the "we will stop her" texting idiot, and 2 character references who had zero firsthand knowledge of anything. And despite a lack of any firsthand evidence, the inspector proceeded to take action to weaponize the whistleblower process. He exceeded his lawful jurisdiction. He ignored DOJ guidance, relied on secondhand testimony, hearsay, to ensure the whistleblower complaint was released to Congress, referred to the FBI, and then they leaked the whole thing to the media. Then the Permanent Select Committee chairman, called Adam Pencilneck Schiff at the time, and Nancy Pelosi used this false secondhand narrative, they should all be in jail, to create media intrigue and ultimately spark the entire basis for the impeachment hoax. She, of course, has some quotes here. The documents were released. We read those earlier this week. Now the criminal referral is here. There was no firsthand evidence. The Intelligence Community Inspector General's preliminary investigation into this was not firsthand at all. All secondhand. The guy who made the complaint, Ciaramella, was a literal Democrat, and they still elevated it because Atkinson probably hated Trump as well. So the whistleblower confirmed she had no firsthand knowledge of anything. It's a he, it's not a she. In an initial form submitted by the whistleblower, he claimed, "I do not have direct knowledge of any private comments or communications." New witness interviews released also show that other information was false, and it hid the fact that neither the whistleblower nor the key witnesses about the presidents, none of it was relied on any firsthand knowledge. In fact, witness number 2 admitted that upon reading the transcript of the call, he or she would not have been able to get from point A to point Z. Person witness 2 says, "I read it. I read the transcript. It was a perfect call. Where's the crime?" Said, "I don't see anything here. And I don't see the granular detail that the whistleblower had to even justify the filing of the complaint." Also admitted that the whistleblower, in order to get there, had to read between the lines of what was being said. Like, you get it. Like, we have to charge him with this. And that the perception of the quid pro quo, quote, became clear only in hindsight. And the whistleblower superior is a senior officer at the NIC, the National Intelligence Council, also told the inspector general that they did not like how the whistleblower handled the filing of the report, saying that they were looped in right at the time of the crash. And Atkinson's 14-day preliminary investigation was intended to assess the apparent credibility, but instead became the basis of a mischaracterized attempt. And in his own words, Atkinson said specifically that his conclusions were based on a preliminary investigation, and he admitted, "I haven't done an investigation to determine whether they actually in fact took place, that all of the allegations actually even happened." Okay, so I don't know. I just got this report and I had to just run it up the chain. Didn't do his due diligence in the run up to an election because they were trying to rig an election. And they say, "Oh, 2020 was one of the most safe and secure elections of all time." They're rigging it right here with political attacks. Atkinson also relied on testimony from a co-author of the Russian hoax ICA. Gabbard revealed evidence that Barack Obama directed the creation of that fake document. This served as the basis for a years-long coup against the president. It subverted the will of the American people and tried to delegitimize Trump from the very beginning. He was Putin's puppet. Remember all those allegations? Trump was doing the bidding of the Russians because they stole the election from Hillary Clinton. We had to go through years of Robert Mueller and that entire attack. Witness 2 was one of the key sources for the whistleblowers ahead of the complaint, admits that he was a part of the 2017 hoax. They just brought back the old crew. Witness 2 also admitted to working with Peter Strzok, a disgraced philanderer. Witness 2 also further exposed his political bias when says, well, I routinely deal with issues on a daily basis that are against my personal beliefs and that I'm disappointed every day by policy decisions and statements made by political figures. Yeah. Now, the whistleblower also has lies that were confirmed, admitted that he or she lied to the inspector general about speaking to Democrats in Congress, submitted the complaint, and didn't check the box that, oh, yeah, he was colluding with the Democrats on the Intelligence Committee. Said, I didn't think it was urgent to disclose that because I was only getting some procedural guidance. I wasn't actually talking with them about anything substantive. Atkinson admits in the newly declassified testimony that his team did ask the complainant who else knew about the disclosure. And he lied to them that this person, Ciaramella, alerted the Democratic staff. Didn't tell the inspector general that he went and talked to Schiff's people. The whistleblower interviewers also reveals that he's a registered Democrat, that he worked closely with Vice President Joe, traveled with Vice President Biden to Ukraine, and was literally a part of the conversations where the corruption was discussed. The whistleblower also claims to have become a target of right-wing bloggers and conspiracy theorists who got him dead to rights. I mean, rightfully so. He's the target because he's a criminal, in my opinion. But Atkinson ignored all this. He said, I never considered him to be politically biased at all. No, even though he's making this complaint to protect Joe Biden from the investigation that would hopefully be coming against him for his quid pro quo. So despite all of this, all of those bias and motive arguments were all blocked during the 2020 impeachment trial. Now we know that Atkinson knew that a transcript of Trump's call existed, but he never, throughout the entire investigation, wanted to even read it. Because if he read it, that would mean he would see there's no problem there. And this entire process would have to be deviated and have to be canceled because he would see that there is no there. So you don't even read the transcript if you know it's there? Then he sent a criminal referral to the DOJ. Even though he relied on secondhand knowledge, the DOJ responded and said there is no basis for a criminal case at all, saying that based on the facts and the law, there is no campaign finance violation, there is no action warranted, period. After the DOJ reviewed this and said there was no urgent concern, he ignored it. He proceeded to transmit the Democrats' complaint from the whistleblower to Congress, didn't read anything, and then made it and marked it urgent concern and continued forward with the investigation, wrote a letter to the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, said there's an urgent concern and you guys have to do something about this. And as was reported at the time, the OIG, the Inspector General, altered the whistleblower form within months of the 19 phone call to no longer require firsthand knowledge, okay? Because they don't have firsthand knowledge, they just change it. Now we can accept hearsay, but they use the old form. Atkinson also sought unprecedented assistance from other inspector generals to carry this out and wanted to see whether other inspectors could proceed in case he couldn't. He went to state, he went to justice, he went to defense, and now he is hopefully going to be charged with crimes for all of this seditious behavior. Here is more from Tulsi, second half of that interview.
Information, even if it were unreliable and deemed unreliable by the Inspector General. Why was that standard changed?
This is something that, again, there's further lies being told in the transcripts of this former Inspector General Atkinson when he went and testified before the House Intelligence Committee, where he was directly asked this question that you're asking here now. And he's making claims, oh, well, the law required me to do it. That's complete nonsense. The law did not require him to do it. The responsibility is with the Inspector General to deem whether or not a complaint is credible and whether or not it is urgent. How do you find a complaint to be credible when there is zero evidence provided and there is zero firsthand knowledge provided, not only by the whistleblower, by any witness in this case? And when the Inspector General himself did not even request to see the documents that these individuals are referencing in their false accusations. And so it was obviously, to me, part of this plot to change the standard which the Inspector General did, from requiring that there be either evidence or firsthand knowledge presented in order to determine whether or not a complaint is credible, to merely allowing for hearsay and nothing else. This fed into this manufactured narrative.
Yeah, is it ever appropriate for politicians to be working with the intelligence community behind the scenes on an impeachment probe?
No, and this is why the fact that the so-called whistleblower, instead of going directly to the Inspector General and filing a complaint, the fact that this whistleblower went directly to the House Intelligence Committee and Adam Schiff specifically and his team really points to the politicization of intelligence and the intelligence community. And again, the whistleblower process, which is really egregious because it is the channel for those to come and report complaints about things like politicized intelligence and the tactics of the deep state being deployed.
Well, and then let's not forget that Adam Schiff repeatedly lied about having any contact ahead of time with this so-called whistleblower after the standards were changed so that they could move forward with this in a political fashion right ahead of an election year. But regarding accountability, today your office sent criminal referrals to the Department of Justice related to your findings in this case. Can you talk to us about why you decided to do that and which laws you believe were broken?
Because they belong in jail.
It's important to push for accountability. First step is exposing the truth to the American people. That is a huge step towards accountability because the more we shine a light on the truth of these deep state tactics to undermine our republic and the will of the American people, the more likely it is that we have hope for change. Accountability can come after the presentation of the truth, and in this case, documents that had not been released publicly before. I'm leaving it up to the lawyers and the Department of Justice to take a look at this and to determine the specific legal parameters, but it was important for us to refer this along with all of the information that we have so that the Department of Justice can do exactly that and investigate it.
Director Gabbard, President Trump has tasked you with ridding the intelligence community of political influence of weaponization. What is the status of that? And what is your message to those who say that you're coming out with this report as a distraction, there isn't really a political issue happening within the intelligence community, and that you're just using it as a way to get at Democrats in an election year? Why is this important?
You know, those who often respond with those kinds of diatribes and kind of a lack of substantive response to the real issue at hand really point to the fact that what we are exposing to the American people has such huge consequences, and it really points to usually the critics, the Democrat critics' culpability in this, both those who were involved and those who knew about it. The time is always right to expose the truth. We know that the deep state rot within the intelligence community has existed for a very long time, and it is very deep. As we continue to discover new examples of these tried and true tactics that have been deployed, unfortunately, time and time again, we're going to continue to expose that truth. Once again, just by shining a light on the truth, we have the opportunity for the American people to now recognize if they try to use these tactics again, we are all watching and we are all standing on guard because we stand to protect our republic.
Well, we hear a lot about the need to protect democracy, and I can't think of something worse than attacking our constitutional republic by politicizing and weaponizing the intelligence community against American voters and against the people that they elect. Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, great to see you. Thank you for your work, and I look forward to hearing more. Thank you.
Tulsi Gabbard releasing the documents. Now it's over to the DOJ to pick them up and do something about it. Hopefully they do, because there needs to be accountability. And it's always the people who are dismissive of it who are, as Tulsi said, the most culpable. This is old news. There's no there. Why are you digging into an old 10-year-old case? Blah, 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 blah. You hear the same thing over and over again. It's because they want you to move on because they don't want to go to jail. So here's Mark Meadows. He was also out. He said, this is a big deal. This is Trump's former chief of staff during his first term. He said, but you know, we would have never, ever seen this if they would have been successful. If they could have kept Trump out of the White House, all of these documents would have been buried forever. Here's Mark Meadows.
White House chief of staff who served during President Trump's first term. Mark, good to see you. Thanks for coming on. Great to be with you both, and obviously this news of Director Tulsi Gabbard making a criminal referral is a big deal, but we would have never seen it. I want to emphasize, we would never have seen this had Donald Trump not been reelected. And quite frankly, with Tulsi being in this position and the tenacious reporting of a conservative reporter that actually got this news out there.
No, we certainly wouldn't. So who do you think these two are, and where does this go? What would you like to see here, Mark?
Yeah, so obviously the whistleblower's name is still classified, although I will say that there's been a number of reporting on who it's suggested to be. But here's the troubling thing.
The guy does podcasts.
This dates back, honestly, when we were in the Congress, where we were actually in the impeachment area of that. We actually knew about this individual, and the credibility was very, very suspect at that time.
It seems like the credibility of some of these witnesses during the impeachment became an issue now these years later. But Mark, let me ask you, Democrats, they're not happy about this criminal referral. I'm sure that shocks you. In a statement, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Jim Himes, says, quote, "This apparent criminal referral will amount to nothing because no misconduct occurred. But it will do is chill future whistleblowers from coming forward to Congress with confidence that the law will protect them. I suspect that is precisely the point." Will this have any impact on future whistleblowers, to what he was saying?
Well, listen, Congressman Himes, he's continuing the narrative that the Democrats used all the way back in 2019. And I can tell you that is very problematic because if you look at the referral, if you look at the reporting that is out there, this person had no firsthand knowledge, so is not even technically a real whistleblower. And you commented on your lead-in there that all of this was actually part of I've been informed. Well, they're not even a whistleblower with firsthand knowledge, so I don't see it have a chilling effect. Here's what we do need to expose. If there was, and there has been alleged, if there was a coordination with Democrats to actually target President Trump at the time with this, the Intel Committee should be nonpartisan. And when you weaponize national security apparatus that's been alleged here, we have to get to the bottom of it. But I don't see it having a chilling effect on whistleblowers. We all want to protect legitimate whistleblowers, but we don't want it to be used to advance a political agenda.
Well, and I'm just listening to jump in. Covering the courts and covering the impeachments, one of the things that bothered me the most was the idea of protecting what you're referring to as hearsay. It would never be allowed in a courtroom, but it, of course, was allowed as part of the impeachment.
Well, so, Mark, you mentioned that there was no firsthand knowledge. Just to bring the audience up to speed here, Michael Atkinson, right? He was the IG investigating this. Interviews 4 individuals with no firsthand knowledge of the so-called call here in Ukraine. Expand on that and explain, Mark, what really happened with that.
Okay, so this whistleblower actually wasn't on the call, was told about the call either second or third hand, and then purported to be a whistleblower, but they had connected. Not only were they a registered Democrat, that shouldn't be a disqualifying effort, but they had a real relationship, an ongoing relationship previously with Democrat administration, both in the Obama administration and with Joe Biden directly. So, whenever you have that, you have to say, all right, we're leading up to a re-election at that point for Donald Trump, and yet you have someone who's aligned more with the potential candidate that's going up against Donald Trump being the whistleblower. And listen, we have to put this in the context. All of this was at the same time that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's relationship with Ukraine was coming under real scrutiny. And so they were saying, don't look at the real problem. Let's just look at this potential problem where ultimately there wasn't a there.
Yep. They wanted to go after the investigation, the investigators, rather than the criminals. as is their MO all across the country. But others are now coming under additional scrutiny. We are all waiting for John Brennan's indictment to come down the line. And now Reuters is reporting exclusively today that the FBI under Trump now ramping up the probe of the ex-CIA chief called John Brennan over the Russia report, that 2017 ICA coming out of Washington, saying the FBI plans to question roughly a half dozen witnesses in its criminal inquiry into Brennan over the 2017 ICA that was made up based on Hillary Clinton campaign propaganda that said Trump and the Russians colluded to steal the Hillary Clinton presidency. The interviews, which have not been previously reported and are expected to include former intelligence officials involved in the 2017 ICA, will delve into the origins of the Trump-Russia inquiry. That, of course, is something we have long been urging to happen. The probe represents a far-reaching effort by the DOJ to revisit an investigation. All of this is all nonsense, okay? So this is not even really reporting. This is commentary. Said there was a bipartisan Senate committee and a CIA review. You mean the CIA reviewed itself and found that John Brennan didn't do anything wrong? You're kidding me. Amazing. A bipartisan Senate committee looked at the intelligence, just like the House Permanent Select Committee also looked at the intelligence that was engineered by the same intelligence committee, with Adam Schiff meeting with the whistleblower and then encouraging him and guiding him to go make the complaint through this mechanism and manner so that it shows up on his desk. The same Senate committee that's reviewing the information presented to them by the CIA that does not include the classified annex, which is the Hillary Clinton Steele dossier. It's irrelevant. No one cares. They review themselves. They find they did nothing wrong. They're all in lockstep with each other, doing the bidding of the intelligence agencies. So just leave that out of your crap article. Reuters could not determine the specific identities of the people who are going to be interviewed in the next several weeks. Investigators have already conducted a small number of witness interviews. Good. The probe is being run by Miami. Jason Quinones down there, Southern District of Florida. And Cannon, Judge Cannon, who also booted that illegal Jack Smith, who's not a real boy, who they shoved into a special counsel's role and gave him tens of millions of dollars, maybe 100 million, to go prosecute the president in, again, another operation, was booted off, thank you to Cannon. So the sources said it's focusing on congressional testimony that Brennan gave in 2023 about the crafting of the assessment. Brennan was told by prosecutors that he is the target of the investigation. We knew that. Trump ally Jim Jordan from Ohio referred Brennan to the DOJ back in October, saying that the director had made false statements to the House Judiciary Committee. Brennan is now a cable news analyst. You just go from the CIA over to MS Now. And longtime critic of Trump says this is politically biased. His lawyer said there's no legal basis to this and more. Todd Blanche is now overseeing things. Trump fired Bondi for doing nothing. The intelligence assessment issued in January 17, days before Trump's inauguration, said that Pooty wanted to boost Trump's candidacy. All fake, made up on the Steele dossier. So this could face legal challenges. They say Brennan's testimony took place before the House committee in Washington, not in Florida. It's part of a grand conspiracy, and I think the legal basis will be that the effects of the conspiracy be a long arm reached into Florida, which is where Trump was residing. So it's like the idea would be that you are conspiring against somebody from friendly jurisdictions, and then actually the impacts of your conspiracy are impacting them in another state. The referral from Jordan says that Brennan lied to the panel in discussing the Steele dossier, which was a report by a British intelligence officer called Christopher Steele. It was funded by Hillary and was all made up. Brennan has repeatedly said the CIA opposed including the dossier. That's not true at all. We know there were others who actually opposed it. Brennan said we got to put it in there because they had no evidence. This is the only thing that they could rely on. So they shoved it in there in order to engineer the entire attack. So Caroline Leavitt was out and she was also explaining this, saying it's not just Brennan, it's not just Atkinson or Eric, it's a bunch of other people, including Comey, McCabe, Clapper, and many others. Here is Caroline from the White House.
Another matter, over the past few days, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard has unveiled shocking new evidence that former President Barack Obama and top aides in the Obama administration conspired to subvert President Trump's 2016 election victory and undermine the democratic will of the American people. While publicly pretending to engage in a peaceful transfer of power, in private, former President Obama went to great and nefarious lengths to try to sow discord among the public and sabotage his successor, President Trump. The new evidence released by the Director of National Intelligence, who is here with me today, confirms that the Obama administration manufactured politicized intelligence, which was later used as the justification for baseless smears against President Trump in an effort to try to delegitimize his victory before he even took the oath of office. The truth is that President Trump never had anything to do with Russia, and the Russia collusion hoax was a massive fraud perpetuated on the American people from the very beginning. And the worst part of this is Obama knew that truth, and so did all of the other corrupt officials involved in this scam, including former CIA Director John Brennan, former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, former FBI Director James Comey, former Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, and many others. Director of National Intelligence Gabbard's report further confirms what we already knew. There was no collusion, no corruption, except on the part of Barack Obama and the weaponized intelligence agencies at the time. The Russia hoax was a blatant lie, all ginned up by Democrat political operatives that were signed off on by then President Obama and leaked to the news media to launch a years-long witch hunt against President Trump and his first administration. Allies of the president, including his own son, Donald Trump Jr., were disgustingly smeared as Russian assets, and some even had their lives destroyed because of this vicious lie. The president's first 2 years in office had this fake distraction hanging over it, and endless resources, time, and political capital were spent having to debunk these lies from the highest levels of our government. Now, nearly 10 years later, thanks to the declassification of documents by Director Gabbard, the truth has finally come to light. And this truth vindicates President Trump, his family, and his many allies and associates who were smeared with defamatory lies. President Trump was right from the beginning about all of this, and we are grateful that justice can be served. Now, we have even more damning evidence implicating those who tried to sabotage a duly elected president and did grave material harm to our republic. Thanks to additional important work done by CIA Director Ratcliffe, Committee Chairman Rick Crawford over the past few months, a newly declassified 2020 report prepared by the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, which DNI Director Gabbard has declassified, found that the intel community did not have any direct information that Russian President Vladimir Putin wanted to help elect President Trump in 2016. And in fact, Russia was actively preparing for a Hillary Clinton victory. But at the unusual direction of Barack Obama at the time, the intel community published implausible intelligence suggesting otherwise. Why? To sabotage the incoming president. This is truly one of the greatest political scandals in American history. And reporters at legacy outlets, some of which are sitting in this room today, like the New York Times and the Washington Post, were ridiculously awarded Pulitzer Prizes for their perpetuation of this hoax. It's well past time for those awards to be stripped from the journalists who receive them. It is not journalism to propagate political disinformation in service of the Democrat Party and those in the intelligence community who hand over out of context and fake intelligence to push a false political narrative.
It was all one big long op. Basically, the entire first term was a CIA coup, from the fake Russian collusion hoax in 2017 in the ICA all the way through the fake bad phone call and quid pro quo in 2019. Then we got COVID and all of the other problems that emerged after that. All intelligence agencies trying to dictate the course of America. And the people behind it are the real seditious conspirators, the real traitors. They belong in jail. Hopefully, the new DOJ can take this evidence that has been assembled for them on a silver platter and do something with it. Please, Todd, can we have an indictment? Can we please have an indictment, Todd? Hopefully we get some. We're going to keep our eye on this one. Thank you for subscribing and joining as we do. All right. Now, let's talk about some other fraudsters that are out there. And we've got this election freakout story, which is a pretty good one. We got some new emails that have now dropped, and here is what went down. Election officials freaked out once the ballots were seized in Georgia. We now have new emails coming from Arizona specifically referencing recent events in Fulton County. We know the FBI showed up there with valid search warrants and said, you know, those pallets full of ballots, we're going to take those because they seem to be evidence of crimes. And once that happened, all of the other election fraudsters all around the country hit the panic button and started sending these emails out that look like this. You see these coming from Maricopa.gov, sent back on February 12, 2026, says recent events, Fulton County. We're really nervous about this. Scott Jarrett is this guy who we've heard a lot about when we were going through the Kari Lake saga. Has been in Arizona for a long time, works with the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, different from the Maricopa County Recorder, where they split election duties between a board and a county recorder called Justin Heap. And he's been doing this for a long time. And so once Fulton County got raided lawfully by the FBI, he went panic town and sent this email. And not only him, this came from Maricopa, but then we also had this other email which dropped from Adrian Fontes's office. Okay, Lisa M. Mara, the state election director. This is Adrian Fontes, the same guy who, along with the Attorney General Chris Mays in Arizona, have both been referred by the Senate president in Arizona, called Warren Peterson, for criminal charges for violating the law by threatening witnesses who may be subject to federal subpoenas. They sent them a threatening letter saying, we're going to throw you in jail. We're going to charge you with felonies. If you get a grand jury subpoena from the FBI and you're ordered to comply with election records requests, or you give them any information on a hard drive like Warren Peterson did, you're going to jail. We're going to prosecute you. Don't you even think about doing it. So it's that organization, that group. So here are some of the emails, and you can see a little bit of nervousness in their voice. So Scott sends this to election, all employees, to every single person in Maricopa County who's on the election team. He says, 4:44 p.m., right before 5 o'clock, everyone wants to leave. Hello, all. After the recent events in Fulton County and the election center in Georgia, I understand that staff may have questions. I want you to feel informed and safe in the workplace. And the best way to achieve this is with information. So below are some basic things to do in the event a federal agency visits MCTEC, the Maricopa County Tabulation Election Center. Acting like this is like a school shooting or something, like there's an active shooter. It's a lawful investigation. Are you guys harboring evidence of a crime? No? Then what are you worried about? He says, okay, if FBI agents show up, stay calm and professional. Cooperate with law enforcement officials. Allow them access to whatever and wherever they ask to go. Do not obstruct, film, or record any activity. Contact me, contact Christine, or contact Jennifer immediately. We did meet with front desk staff earlier today. They're like, we're going to get raided too, and provide them with similar information. The items above might sound simple, but under stress, simple can be overwhelming. Please know that you are all a priority for me and county leadership. Thank you, Scott Jarrett, elections director, who's been involved in some of the worst run elections in American history. So he sends that. You might say, okay, it's not that big of a deal. It's not really much of a panic. But then you get the other one from the Arizona Secretary of State. Sends this to everybody, okay? Everybody, all the counties, Mojave, Gila County, Santa Cruz, Greenlee, Navajo, Maricopa, Pima, and every single other county throughout the entire state of Arizona. She goes into her bookmarks and her contacts list, adds them all, okay? Public records request, all these people all over the place, at all of the various Secretary of State's officials who are part of the election. Says, here's a story coming out of Fulton County, Georgia, regarding the FBI search warrant. Sends this one, says, good afternoon, election officials. I wanted to make sure you were aware of a situation occurring today in Fulton County, Georgia. They just had the FBI show up over there, sends them a news article. Says the secretary's office is taking steps to be prepared if something similar happens in Arizona, like they're under attack, and will support any counties if they have questions about records requests or retention requirements, statutes, and record retention policies. We are monitoring this situation closely, and if you have specific questions, please call me at this phone number. Sincerely, thank you, Lisa M. Mara. In other words, let us know if you're getting raided. And we know that the follow-up emails and demands came also from her boss, Adrian Fontes, the actually elected so-called Secretary of State. He, of course, along with Chris Mays, the Attorney General, sent some follow-up emails and some follow-up letters and said, if you give them anything, like the Senate president did, you're in violation of Arizona privacy laws, and we're going to prosecute you with crimes. All of that was checked out by Snell and Wilmer, a very prolific law firm in the state of Arizona. And they said, that is obstruction. That is witness tampering. You guys should go to jail for that, which led to an actual criminal referral over to the DOJ. Hopefully it continues on and we get some prosecutions on that one. So those letters dropped and we see that there was more. NBC News was also poking around. And so Justin Heap is the new county recorder in Arizona, in Maricopa. And he has promised that he's going to actually come in and fix some of these elections. And he has been working closely with Harmeet Dhillon, as we're going to see in some follow-up letters. So NBC News sent a letter over to the county recorder, okay? Different than these two other bodies, the Secretary of State. Arizona elections are all kind of bifurcated. Multiple different roles are spread around. So we've got the Board of Supervisors that handles one part of it. We have the county recorder, which handles another part of it. And if you remember, Stephen Richer, who was this guy right here, on his way out, he was the former recorder of Maricopa County, the guy who came in before Justin Heap. We're going to read some letters from Justin Heap coming up. And Richer, on his way out, entered into a settlement agreement with the Board of Supervisors. So the recorder settles with the board. And what he does is he gives up a bunch of county recorder responsibilities over to the board and basically divests his office of powers so that the incoming Justin Heap doesn't have them anymore. And so that he can basically give all of the evidence out from his office, give it back to the recorders. To the Board of Supervisors. And if you remember, this guy, in my opinion, was very anti-Trump on his way out. And he went over to the Cato Institute, a hack agency, Harvard, Kennedy, all the other things. And he was also a defender of democracy, doing all of these various things. Previously, he also worked on a bunch of other things. Oh, and where does this come from? You might be wondering, where is this profile coming from? See this little logo up here? States United Democracy Center. Okay, they write this glowing, glazing little bio for Stephen Richer, the former county recorder, who divested his office of all the power so that the next guy coming in to fix his problems doesn't have access to the evidence, basically takes the murder weapon and gives it off to a friendly board. Well, this is published on States United Democracy Center. Oh, yeah. What is the States United Democracy Center? Where does that come from? Remember this fella right here? Norm Eisen? Oh, yeah. He is the founder and the former chair of the States United Democracy Center. Okay, so follow the bouncing ball from Norm Eisen, Democrat, lawfare, super hack lawyer, has a glowing profile of Stephen Richer, tells you everything you need to know about the guy. And that's who we're talking about as we get into some of these letters. Now, we fast forward and NBC says, hey, I want to know, did Tulsi come over there? Did the FBI contact Maricopa County? Let me know if you can help. And they send some letters back and forth with the press. But then we see there were some other letters that came in from Harmeet Dhillon. So Justin Heap, the new guy who comes in and takes over after Stephen Richer is now exited, says this letter is responding to Harmeet Dhillon. And Harmeet, you sent a letter over to the Secretary of State. You reference my office. So now I'm writing to let you know I'm wanting and willing to work with your office. We support your efforts. We're trying to fix Arizona. Please do not hesitate to contact me with any other additional questions. And they responded back to Harmeet. So Harmeet sent some letters in that looked like this. She sends this one back September 4th. Harmeet sent another one back on September 5th. I'm sorry, that was a response to Harmeet. And she sent another one. I think it's down here. A bunch of letters going back and forth and some duplicate documents. Okay, let's go back up. Sorry about all the scrolling. But okay, Harmeet sends this letter. All right, Adrian. Adrian Fontes is the guy who is threatening jail if you comply with any of this request. Harmeet says, hey, Adrian, on August 12th, the DOJ informed you that we're going to sue your booty. So please be advised that this is a notice to preserve all data, all electronically stored election records, copies and backups, along with any paper files from 2020 up until present. This is a preservation notice. We have received complaints about errors and malfeasance in Maricopa County elections, and this letter serves as notice to preserve everything. It covers all records, emails, elections, anything from 2020 to 2024. It's come to our attention that you, the Maricopa Elections Department, and the recorder, the Board of Supervisors, intend to destroy records from 2020 and 2022, including staff emails, so that nobody can identify and pinpoint the fraudsters. Please be advised that any attempts to destroy these records will be construed by us as unintentional spoliation of evidence. If you have any questions, contact Maureen from our office. Thank you. Sincerely, your friend, Harmeet Dhillon. So that goes out. Then Justin Heap responded and he said, hey, Harmeet, you mentioned the county recorder's office in that letter. Says, I'm writing in response to your letter. First, I acknowledge receipt of this. We're in full agreement. We are trying to preserve all records outlined. We recognize the seriousness of this. We're committed to ensuring compliance with you. Now, it's important to clarify, okay, Harmeet? Shortly prior to taking my office, my predecessor, Stephen Richer, this guy, who is the person we just talked about right here, who is over on the States United Democracy Center, the agency that was founded and chaired by Norm Eisen, you know who he is. That guy, he entered into a calculated agreement with the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. As part of that agreement, all documents, communications, and related records from prior elections and administrations were shoveled out and were transferred out of the county recorder and given over to the elections department. And I don't have them anymore. We are currently engaged in litigation with the Board of Supervisors to get those materials archived and the records in lawful custody back over to us. That's what we're fighting about. But at present, though, my staff does not have access to these reference records, nor do we have control of them because Stephen Richer took all of the evidence and divested his office of it so that nobody could look into it. So in mid-August 25, my office became aware of indications that elections and ETI intended to delete these archived records. They wanted to cover up the crime. So anything from 2020 and 2022 should be nuked. In response, I issued a formal request to our county manager called Jen, demanding the preservations of all records. This action was taken promptly to ensure the preservation duties to make sure we're actually following state and federal law. Now, please be assured my office is fully committed to working with you. We share your goal of safeguarding election integrity. We're going to continue to work with all relevant stakeholders to ensure no records are lost, compromised, or destroyed. If you need anything else, let me know. He sent this letter out saying, Jen, back in August 13th, before Harmeet sent her letter, Jen, I've got concerns about this. I am writing to raise concerns about our current email and retention and archive policies. We need to follow the law. So at present, it appears that retention periods of certain categories of email may not align with the law. And we actually have rules about this. The archiving process does not consistently preserve all relevant messages. The staff currently responsible for managing the email system don't understand how to retain things or for how long. And so because of the limitations, our office is unable to pull and actually fulfill these records requests. So these are risks of compliance problems. We need a policy. And so because of these concerns, our department will be implementing its own email retention and our own archiving system. And so this allows us to actually monitor and maintain these records more appropriately. And the letters went back and forth. And you can see this is more of the same, duplicate copies of the same materials. So as we're learning, Stephen Richer was handing all of this off and sending it out to the other side so that nobody could go find it again. And there were some other emails. So then Maureen responded from Harmeet's office and said, hey, Justin, thanks for the reply. What are you guys litigating? Send me the docket. Send me some information about that. That would be very helpful. Send me the court documents, the next court date, so I can see what's ultimately happening and why you are fighting to get your powers back after Stephen Richer, who is now on Norm Eisen's website, was trying to divest your office. Stephen Richer was the prior county recorder. He leaves, then prevents Justin Heap from having access to the materials that he presided over. Why would that be? We think we know. So all of that is happening in Arizona. They're very nervous, obviously. They don't want any more inquiries coming from the DOJ. They don't want any more search warrants to be executed or any federal subpoenas to come down, lest you be prosecuted if you comply, according to A.G. Mays and Adrian Fontes. Now, while all this is happening, Burt Jones, not Burt Reynolds, that's a different guy, says, my letter I sent to the state election board about securing our elections can also be found here. So in Arizona, they were freaking out about the Fulton County raid and the seizure of their ballots. And now they're getting ready to have new elections. And the office of the lieutenant governor, Burt Jones, sent this one out just days ago. He said, all right, Georgia state election board members, first, I want to thank you for your tremendous service to the people of Georgia. Your role on this board is vital. We want fair, safe, secure, and transparent elections. Now, I write to you today in regard to the pending effective date of a provision of a new Senate bill, 189, which the General Assembly passed and which Governor Brian Kemp signed almost 2 years ago. The effective date is July 1, 2026. So before the midterms happen, this has to be effective. Here's what the law says. The text portion of the paper ballot marked and printed by the electronic ballot marker indicating the elector's selection shall constitute the official ballot and shall constitute the official vote for purposes of vote tabulation, any recount, and any audit under the law. The text portion of the paper ballot that's marked and the printed ballot by the electronic ballot marker, that's the vote. The official tabulation count of any ballot scanner shall be based upon the text portion or the machine mark, provided that the mark clearly denotes the selection and does not use a QR code. Okay, no barcodes, no similar codes of these ballots, and we're not using any machine coding that may be printed on the ballots. Okay, we mark the ballot either digitally or physically. That's what counts. Remember, in Georgia, you'd go into the machine, you'd pick your numbers, your candidates. It would spit out a QR code. So it would take your votes, encode them into a QR record. Then you take the QR code over to the counter. Then the counter would read the code. Now, the problem with that, of course, is you can't be sure, since you can't read a QR code, whether your votes got properly translated. Then, of course, we're missing hundreds of thousands of ballot images. They deleted all of the images that would have done the encoding. And so nobody can tell whether there was a digital inflation of the votes or not. Now, as has widely been reported, so they changed the law, no more QR codes. As been widely reported, in the nearly 2 years since this law was passed, Brad Raffensperger has taken no action to prepare the state or to comply with this law in the new upcoming elections, namely by eliminating the use of the QR codes in the tabulations of the votes that were cast by the BMD, the ballot marking device, the machines. I consider this a significant failure on his part, which he has characteristically, just like Brad does, tried to blame it on others. Brad openly opposed the passage of this bill. He worked to defeat it. He pushed for a delay of the effective date in this upcoming summer. Now, additionally, the secretary also recommended against funding for software upgrades and a security patch. Why would he? Since that time, in the rare instances when he has bothered to engage with the Assembly's appropriations process, Brad has provided widely varying estimates of how much it would cost to go from the current QR code system into a format that would not utilize any QR codes for tabulation purposes. Given that there has been very little support in either chamber of the General Assembly for the Secretary's funding demands, it has been obvious to me, says Lieutenant Governor Jones, that I am not the only one who lends little credibility to his cost estimates or to those articulated by the current software vendors or equipment vendors. That too is part of a larger pattern of behavior of mismanagement on Brad Raffensperger's part and is a key reason why the General Assembly removed him from the state election board 2 years ago in separate provisions of the law that have already gone into effect. So Jones says, it is for these reasons that I have been unwilling to accede to the Secretary's unreasonable demands or to provide him with unilateral authority to choose a successor voting system for the state. That very scenario was contemplated by a new bill, substitute bill, which would have essentially delayed this and also begun a full-scale transition to a new system. Now, while I do support the elimination of reliance on touchscreen voting machines as the primary method, I and others have no confidence that Raffensperger is the person to oversee that process over the final months of his term. So that is a process which should be undertaken by a new secretary in 2027. However, it seems clear that Brad's inactions now leaves Georgia's elections in an unsettled state of affairs in 2026. So I therefore call upon the state board to conduct an immediate public review of the Georgia voting system. Specifically, I believe you must determine whether our current software and hardware can be utilized in compliance with the law and other applicable state laws after July 1. If it cannot, I believe it is well within the board's authority to direct Georgia counties to implement the backup paper ballot system for the 2026 elections. Brad Raffensperger, his unwillingness or inability to implement these may have rendered the current BMD-based voting system impossible or impracticable to use. The law says no more QR codes. He hasn't made any changes, so those systems cannot be used. The law says no. The board should also be prepared to issue significant guidance to counties on the implementation of a backup voting system and undertake any rulemaking necessary to ensure that the process runs smoothly and uniformly in jurisdictions large and small to ensure that we have actual elections that are in alignment with the law. I strongly believe this is the right solution to the problem that Raffensperger has created. The General Assembly and Governor Kemp expressed a clear policy preference against the use of QR codes once we passed this law 2 years ago, reinforcing a long understood prohibition. Brad Raffensperger has sought to thwart that policy from the very beginning and continues to do so today. So in addition, as a temporary measure, a backup solution provided by current law is both workable and preferable to the current system. Since 2021, I have repeatedly expressed a preference for the use of hand-marked paper ballots in all Georgia elections, and I continue to believe that such a system is the most reliable and transparent way for Georgia citizens to actually cast their ballots and their votes. Despite scare tactics used by Brad and his allies in the media, over 2/3 of voters in the United States use paper ballots in elections, and they apparently work just fine in the dozens of states where they are the norm. I am proud of the work the Senate has done to try to move this debate forward, including passing legislation that would make hand-marked ballots the primary voting method in the state of Georgia. So please give strong consideration to this request, as it is vital to Georgia's 2026 elections that they be conducted orderly, efficiently, and transparently. I regret that Brad Raffensperger and his inaction has caused more responsibility to fall on you guys, the state election board. Please let me know, or please know you have an ally in me as we move forward to secure Georgia's 2026 election. Sincerely, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, the president of the Senate. So we'll see what Brad Raffensperger does, but probably nothing. Okay, rather than actually imposing the law and executing the law that was duly passed by the Senate, signed into law by the governor, Brad can just stall it out and just say, well, ran out of time. Sorry, you didn't give me money. You didn't give me enough time. So we're not going to actually change anything. And the elections now are running up against the hard deadline where you've had an ineffective, or let's say obstructionist, Secretary of State in Brad, who doesn't want to actually create a reasonable election system there because he prefers to have the current system, which leads to madness and rigged elections, which nobody can validate until we count those ballots, which we're doing now at the FBI. So while all this is happening, the people who were actually advising the president about just how problematic these elections were. Guys like John Eastman, seen here with a nice thumbs up from the president, has just lost his law license in California because the bar there found that his behavior was problematic and that they don't like when lawyers do their jobs and give advice to the president about the various legal issues that are in front of him. So John Eastman is an American hero, but he's lost his law license in California, says denied, disbarred. He tried to go to the California Supreme Court, but they didn't even hear it. With that cursory ruling, the California Supreme Court declined to take my case despite clear First Amendment violations in taking away his license, which is hard to get in California. The bar and the disbarment recommendation now takes effect. No license. We will appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's costly, but it's important. And you can help him out here. We'll repost this at the top of our timeline on X. You can grab that link. He's got a give, send, go, and a legal defense fund to take this up all the way to SCOTUS, and we hope he wins. Harmeet, Dhillon came out and said the chilling effect on this outrageous persecution of a lawyer for giving advice to his client, the president, cannot be overstated. But this is what they do in California in many Democrat strongholds. They go after the people who are investigating their corruption. We've got John Eastman, a man who is trying to help the president navigate the legal maneuvering that was required in the aftermath of a stolen and rigged election. They steal his license and try to wreck his entire life. But fortunately, he has a lot of allies out there who know what a scam this is. And here was John Eastman on with the War Room posted today.
The fact that they would disbar me for, among other things, speaking on your show or writing an op-ed or giving a speech. This is core protected First Amendment rights, and urging the vice president to do something about the illegality. That's core right to petition the government for redress of grievances, and that they would do this in a disciplinary proceeding that was the longest and most expensive in our nation's history, in all likelihood, before a judge who was just dripping with animosity throughout the 10-week-long trial. And a reporter named Rachel Alexander watched every single day. You actually broadcast some of the proceedings yourself.
Shout out to Rachel
Anybody
Alexander.
that watched
She's
those
amazing.
proceedings just came away stunned at how one-sided it was. Hearsay evidence coming in on the other side, left and right, and being blocked on my side. One of the key issues was whether any reasonable lawyer would have filed the Texas versus Pennsylvania original action in the Supreme Court. And we offered the briefs of 17 different states' attorney generals that did exactly the same thing I did. And she said those were not relevant. But the briefs on the other side of that very same case that took issue with us were all admitted into evidence. I mean, this is how lopsided the thing was. And so that's a federal due process problem as well. And look, we've got to be very clear here. This is much bigger than my own bar license. What's going on here is a leftist Marxist capture of our institutions and then weaponizing them to destroy any political opposition to the deep globalist state that is getting entrenched in this country. And because I stood up to illegality in the 2020 election, other than President Trump himself and perhaps Rudy Giuliani, I've become target number one because I won't stop talking about the illegality and trying to shine a light on it and be like Paul Revere, warning our fellow American citizens of what's about to happen if we don't fix this.
Thank you, John Eastman. He's an American hero. And I think that the more time goes on and the more we're able to learn about all of these fraudulent elections that were governed by various fraudulent secretaries, fraudulent secretaries of state, county recorders, various attorneys general, all of the settlement agreements that happen when third parties sued and then settled with people like Jocelyn Benson to create these deals based on my COVID to then engineer the outcome that they wanted. Then we went to bed on election night, woke up the next morning, and there were water main breaks in Fulton County, and all of the polls, all of the election returns, all flipped overnight. And Joe Biden, one of the most brain dead people who's ever been in our government system, wins by 81 million votes. Also beating all of the bellwether counties, and then all of the recounts. Of course, they put various blocks on the windows. The whole thing was a fraudulent sham. But they have to go after the lawyers. They go after the investigators. They go after the Nick Shirleys. They go after the John Eastmans. And they try to censor people who are talking about these things, calling us harmful and dangerous. Then they weaponize the aftermath of J6 to launch a full-blown attack on a huge portion of America. You would argue the majority of Americans who all had the election stolen from them. So we're going to keep our eye on this, continue to support John Eastman. He's at givesendgo.com/Eastman. If you have any extra love for him, please send it his way because he's an American hero. And we'll be looking forward to seeing him succeed when this case goes up to the Supreme Court. But now, since they've lost, their coup attempt failed, there is panic in the air. They're sending out these little, hand-holding emails to their team like, don't worry, if the FBI shows up here, just act normal. Like when you get pulled over in the car. I have no idea. What'd you pull me over for there, officer? Well, we're going to find out, and we're looking forward to it. So thank you for joining us and subscribing to our channel as we keep our eye on this one and much more. All right, friends, it's been a lovely stream today. If you're just joining us, we had the latest update on the criminal referral. Fox News and Tulsi Gabbard now making the rounds to talk about exactly what has happened. Story breaking late last night. Tulsi Gabbard hitting the media on it. And the criminal referrals now going over for two people, Atkinson and Eric Ciaramella, the classified confidential whistleblower who does a podcast over on Lawfare. Hans Monkey was here today. We had more from Stephen McIntyre. We heard from Tulsi herself. We heard from Mark Meadows, Trump's former chief of staff. We had more news that there is today updates on the John Brennan prosecution. They're apparently at the FBI investigating a lot of the co-conspirators who were there. And Caroline was out yesterday talking about this as well. Then we saw freakouts in Arizona in the Secretary of State's office in the Maricopa County Elections Department from Scott Jarrett. We know Stephen Richer is now over on Norm Eisen's website, getting glazed up and down by Norm Eisen, the founder and the former chair of States United Democracy Center. He also does a bunch of these others, right? Democracy Defenders Fund. He has commentary, and he did Crew and a bunch of these other organizations. The guy's like one of the worst. So we talked about him. We learned that Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones is urging the Georgia Election Board to hop on this, take some action. And we're standing by John Eastman as he loses his license in California, which is turning into a dilapidated dumpster hellhole of communist dictators. And John, we salute you. And we're going to continue to keep our eye on his case. But now it's time to hear from you. Thank you for joining us. If you're just here and you haven't been here before, we would love it if you subscribe. That way we see you back here tomorrow as we close out the week strong and see how the days close out on a lovely Friday. Looking forward to it. And who's here? Oh, it's Christy Nome. Hello, Christy. It's been a little while. Opening the gates. We don't want the gates open. Just keep them closed. We are full. Thank you, Christy. Hey, Tim Jake, bringing in some membos. Thank you, Tim. Great to have some new friends coming in. We had a great members only stream this morning. We talked about the lieutenant governor who murdered his wife and himself while his kids were home in Fairfax. Today, brutal story this morning. We talked about Sonia Sotomayor apologizing to Brett Kavanaugh for her nasty comments. And we talked about Brian Cole's new charges this morning on the members only stream. So we'd love to have you come join us on the members only streams in the morning and get integrated into the Watcher fam. What's up, Tim Jake? And it's a great way to also support our work here. Thank you for that. Mel Private, welcome. SoCal Revka. We've got J-Dog. What's up? Lucas Brown, Oregon Stacker, all gifted membos, courtesy of Tim Jake. Thank you, Tim. Welcome, new membos. Tim Jake, thanks for bringing in some new friends. Great to have him here. Hey, Rick D says, this is great to see. Sergeant Wolf on the mound throwing the first pitch after being shot in the head. Prayers have been answered. Hey, that is amazing. West Virginia National Guard Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolf, who was shot while on duty in Washington, D.C. in November, throws out the first pitch prior to the WVU Penn State game. Man, that is amazing. Oh, gosh, that is amazing. Yeah, prayers answered. That is amazing. We saw him at the State of the Union, too. That's awesome, man. Shout out. I'm glad he's doing good. Thank you for that, Rick D. We appreciate the flag. Hey, Maddie the Surfer. You know, all we hear is referrals and investigations. I don't even pay attention anymore. I need to see actual high-profile Democrats behind bars, period. I know, Maddie, I'm with you on that. It does feel a little, slow and frustrating. Let me just kind of also offer this. Remember that with the Trump prosecutions, we got a lot of the J6 prosecutions very quickly. So like, let's just say, okay, let's just use like the Democratic timeline. Those didn't happen until 2023. Okay, so Biden comes in 21. We had the midterms in 22. We had then the prosecutions all start really in 23. So they take time to develop, right? Even if you're Jack Smith or Fannie Willis or Letitia James or Alvin Bragg, they take time, unfortunately. So hopefully we're seeing it soon. I wouldn't expect anything before the midterms, but maybe in the following year. So hang with us. But I'm with you. It's like, how many referrals can you have? And we also have a changing of the guard at the DOJ. We just saw some good updates with the dismissal of the J6 Oath Keepers and Proud Boys cases. So we want to encourage our team to do well, but it is a little bit frustrating. And it's like, all right, if the Democrats were in charge, there'd already be people in prison. Hey, Lady Ice says, man, Tulsi is such a freaking rock star. I love her. Remember when you were a little leery of her and had some reservations? No, I grew up in Hawaii, so I have to keep an eye on her and really think she will be our first woman POTUS. I just love how poised and well-spoken and sincere she is. She has integrity and wouldn't buy into that freak show party scene from her first days in Congress, a rarity in politics, unfortunately. Go Tulsi. Thank you for that, Lady Ice. To be honest with you, I'm a little leery of everybody. So that's probably true. I am leery of everybody. That's my nature. I can't help it. One old guy, very bad pun. Steele dossier P-tape or golden shower tape, a clear jab at Trump's penchant for gold. One old guy. Not that kind of gold. The metal. Not Russian hookers. One old guy, you silly goose. Dark Rogue, what's up, Dark Rogue? Thank you for bringing in new friends. Zaxis, welcome. Very nice to have you. Pastor Mike Boyle, Dizzy Cutie Ice. What's up, Earl's daughter? The Lord is my spotter. Sphinx is here. Cleo's ow. Trucker Carlson is here. What's up, Rick Savage? Andy, Chris Hergy. We've got Pat Still, military vet. Welcome. Miss T. We got Brenda Shank. What's up, Duh? Laguna Show. The Secret Team and DJ Jenkins is here. Ralph Prestige. What's up, Zaxis? What's up, Trumpster Kendall? All gifted membos courtesy of Dark Rogue. Man, Dark Rogue is working on a cool t-shirt too, I think. Can't wait to see it. Thank you, Dark Rogue. Welcome aboard, new friends. 20 new membos, man. Can't wait to see you guys tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Eastern. Will be a great stream on Friday. What's up, one old guy? A penchant is a strong habitual liking, fondness, or inclination for something. One old guy, a.k.a. Webster's Merriam Dictionary. Thank you for that, one old guy. It's a good word, penchant. Maybe we should use it more. Hey, Dark Rogue, at this point, how can there not be some conspiracy charges? How scared are these politicians of exposure and the deep state? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what Pam Bondi was doing, to be honest with you. But they also have a jurisdictional problem. I think they're trying to figure that out. So like in D.C., they could charge all these people and nothing could happen. So they're trying to create this kind of thesis that Trump is the victim of a grand conspiracy that occurred outside of the District of DC. I'm sorry, Florida, happened in DC. The main elements of the crimes occurred elsewhere, but he was the victim and the subject of the conspiracy. And so they're going to bring the case in Florida. So they got a lot of work to do, no doubt. Jason Quinones is on it, and he's a U.S. attorney. It's in front of Judge Cannon. So we have a little bit more of a shot, in an actual jurisdiction with real judges versus Washington, D.C., where we have Chutkin and Boasberg and 94% Democrat jurors. So, and remember, Chuck Schumer said, if you go after the intelligence agencies, they can hit you 6 ways from Sunday. One old guy, it would take a Clinton deviant, degenerate, perverted mind to zero in on Trump and his penchant for gold to turn it into that. I think that's what you did, one old guy. And something about, you're saying that's the Steele dossier. Yeah, with ladies, only her husband would do the Oval Office or Island and turn it into the fake Steele dossier. Yeah, that's a strange thing. To say Trump's like, he doesn't like germs and stuff. So to say that he like is being urinated on, it's ridiculous. Thank you for that, one old guy. Hey, Brenda, 25 months as a member. What about seditious weasel Alex Vindman? Yeah, what about him? I think you could add him to the list. There's a whole bunch of them. And he was another whistleblower, right? Yeah, we'll see. I haven't heard anything about him, though. Thanks for being here, Brenda, for 25 months. Hey, Lisa T. Thank you, Lisa. Rob, my 100-year-old is listening to you and said, Rob gets it and is easy on the eyes. Hey, shout out. That's amazing. My 100-year-old, like grandma, is grandma or mom? Man, what's up? Thank you for watching the show. Very nice to have you here. You get it too. And we appreciate you being here. Thanks for watching. One old guy, come out of the Babylonian mindset. Biblical definition, keep reaching for the kingdom of our Savior, Jesus. Amen. Pray for all of our families, friends, enemies, and for Jesus' return. Do it as he did. Preach the way, Christ, the truth, Christ, and life. Christ. Amazing. One old guy. Thank you for the nice donos, one old guy. Very generous of you. That's the answer to everything. Jesus. And we appreciate it. One old guy. How dare those California libs defame the Green Hornet sidekick Cato by using it as the name of a pseudo-libertarian think tank? Yeah, well, the Cato Institute, they're like all in favor of immigration. I see them posting all the time. They're like, yeah, no, bring in more illegals. We need it. It's America. Benny Boy, Rob, they changed the intel report, reprinted the form because the original form said the reported must have firsthand knowledge of the incident. Yeah, and I think it was a difference between the new form and the old form. So the new form, they got rid of the firsthand knowledge requirement because that was too exacting. That was too onerous for them. They couldn't reach it. So they just used the old form. They created the new form, but actually used the old form, which is the problem. Data 12. What's up, Data? He's amazing. We love Data from the next generation. Engage. We got Badass Dude. What's up? Data. Thank you. Snoopy's here. Hyphen. Welcome. Cranky Cletus. Doug. Rebby Doe. Sub-Zero Designs. What's up, Doug? We got Jody. 121. Glitzy Glam Fairy. Cloud Topper and Hyphen. All gifted members courtesy of Data 12. E. Texley says Eric Ciaramella and Sean Misko, they also work together for the NSC at the White House. They were said to have been good buddies. Misko left and went to work for Schiff. Now Misko is a Democrat staffer on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. Yeah, it's one big, disgusting, incestuous family. Thank you, E. Texley. It's true. Hey, what's up, Data? And California likes doctors with medical community chopping off of the genitals without anyone in authority calling it child abuse, and what John Eastman said. Yeah. And I think Christopher Rufo released a report today that they're actually offering free bottom surgeries for illegal aliens in California. So they pay for that. I don't know what's going on out there, but it's rough. Mike Alford, 10 months as a member. Crazy government officials hoped this would stay secret. Yeah, and if they would have gotten away with it too, they would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for that meddling Trump, you know. But Trump won. Now the truth is coming out and they're panicked about it. Hopefully they can go to jail. Senior Chief. Yeah, asking about Vindman. Didn't he record the call and also testify? Yeah, I don't know what happened with him. That's a good follow-up. Thank you, Senior Chief. And it says, if the Ukrainian quid pro quo was a setup for impeachment, number one, by CIA, IC to undermine the incoming administration, then January 6th impeachment, number two, was another set of dots connect. From Senior Chief over on Locals. Sadie, what's up, Senior Chief? Have to read that one again. Thanks, Rob. Headed to Give, Send, Go for Eastman. Man, shout out. GiveSendGo.com/Eastman. Thank you, Sadie, for that. And friends, it has been a lovely stream. Mama Pillow, happy birthday, Mama Pillow. What a lovely birthday. Tony Haymunkets, happy birthday, Mama Pillow. We all love you very much, and we wish you the best birthday ever. What a nice comment from Tony Haymunkets. Lovely, lovely indeed. We got our friend Satellite Boy over on X. I believe that Biden ran in 2020 primarily to insulate him and his family from scrutiny and to prop up the impeachment. The impeachment narrative relied entirely on the Biden candidacy, on Trump digging up the dirt on his political opponent in the 2020 election. Yeah, and right to think he did say he got him fired. And Alvy Baby, speaking of stolen elections, yeah, the National Popular Interstate Compact vote has passed in enough states. And the state houses where it hasn't yet passed yet, voice your opposition. At 270, it's the popular vote, not the Electoral College that picks the POTUS. Yeah, and then they'll just flood us with more illegal aliens, and then LA will pick the elections ever since moving forward. We got Tony Hay. One more happy birthday to Mama Pillow. We all love you very much, and we wish you the best birthday ever. And so, friends, what a lovely stream it has been. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to come back tomorrow. We're going to get into it again. And we're looking forward to having you join us as we close out the day on a very lovely Friday. Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh, that image from G-Gum. Oh, my goodness. Hey, happy birthday to you too, Chubby Stubby, over this weekend. Amazing. Lots of fun. All right, so friends, we'll pause here. It is a beautiful Thursday. We'll be back tomorrow. It will be a Friday. We're looking forward to it. Thank you so much for liking the video on the way out. Sin 11 months as a member, says happy birthday, Mama Pillow. And I hope you're doing something fun, Mama Pillow. You deserve it. And you'll have to come back tomorrow and tell us what kind of wildness you got into tonight. Let us know tomorrow. But we'll pause here. Big thanks to our amazing mods and meme smiths. Muffin Rando in the house. Thank you, Donut Mind Me. We got John in the house, of course. K Bean, Carrie B. We got Neuro D, Janek, Dog Digger, Geegum Geegum, Mod Smith or Meme Smith Extraordinaire. Elliot, Just Rhonda, all modding the fort down for us, keeping things nice and orderly. Membos tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Eastern, and then we'll be back here to close out the week strong. We'll get into it again, and in order to do all of this appropriately, we are going to need to see you right back here so that together, with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night. Sleep very well, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching, my beautiful friends. Now it's that time where the stream must end. You brought the heat with every chat and line. Together we expose corruption. One more time we dove in the truth where the media hides. Lit up the lies with receipts on all sides. The fight isn't over, but we made them sweat. We ain't done yet, no, not just yet. Because together we are watching the watchers. Truth on our side. Watching the watchers. We won't be denied. Watching the watchers. Eyes open wide. Fighting for freedom with nothing to hide. Drop a like and don't forget to share. And bring a friend who's ready to care. Tomorrow's lies are just today's news, but here we see through the scripted ruse. Together we are watching the watchers shine in the light. Watching the watchers defending what's right. Watching the watchers